Mona and Marsha. Okay, you're here. Great. Welcome, everybody. One of the things that we want to keep our eyes on is this continued privatization of public space. We do want to thank everybody again. 9,067 people came out and voted yes on issue 3. That's amazing. So the 9,067 project is about how we get every single one of us that voted yes on issue 3 to be active in our community council and to start looking at development differently and taking it on in a different way. To join your community council. Are you part of your community council? And that is a big question for folks, right? Because the community council is the first level in which you get to connect with the development that's happening in the community, but also when the city gives out notifications on things, they give it to the community councils. So you want to make sure that you're part of your community council so you know what's going on in your neighborhood.
And that's also a place where I know for Walnut Hills, it's always great to hear from Principal Jeff Hall from Frederick Douglass Elementary School and Nina over at the other school that's in our neighborhood, because then we know what's going on with the students. We know where we can plug in. A lot of times they need help. And so there's always volunteer opportunities. There are ways that various ways you can plug in, not only for our babies, for our elders, be a part, learn about the development, but also how we can support one another.
Where we get our news is going to be increasingly more important. Social media provides an outlet for people to share information, but oftentimes that information is unchecked and unfounded. Neighborhood level news, then we need that to be put out on social media. We need that to be shared through Street Vibes. We need to make sure that you're putting the information to your network, so your friends and your family and the people in your community who need to know more about what's happening in your neighborhood. If you have a story or if something's going on in your neighborhood, you can submit that to Street Vibes. The city of Cincinnati has 52 neighborhoods. You can join your community council because once you do that, it gives you different perks. So you'll be able to vote, you'll have voting rights on things. But again, all the community councils do things differently. So they have their different bylaws.
Read the bylaws.
Yeah, go to Tiny Natty Hoods. Check out on your community council. When do they meet? Are they meeting on Zoom? Go to their webpage. Find out. You might have to mail in some amount of money, a check or something, to become a member, but you need to become a member of your community council. And I'm saying in the next week, because I know this is the part that Mona wants to talk a little bit about, is the Equitable Development Rubric.
The rubric came about because the community has a right to have some input as far as how development should happen. So the Peasley Neighborhood Center met with several folks, including community members, saying, how should we go about ensuring that when development happens, we have some say in it, and they developed this rubric. So it was one way of engaging or, started generating this conversation that really needs to happen between developers, community council, and the residents. Basically, it's to try to ensure that our neighborhoods are safe, that development is happening fairly, and that it's happening equitably, right? So this is where this race equity comes into, right? We're talking about that. We want to ensure that Black folks and poor folks are not pushed out of neighborhoods. Well, this is one way of doing it. And all of a sudden, if you're switching everything over to market rate, now you're changing the whole dynamics of the community, right? And it's not that we don't love, market rate and folks of that sort to move in, but we also want to respect those who have historically been a part of that neighborhood, who created that neighborhood, who made that neighborhood what it is, and honor and be able to keep them in that same space as well. A lot of time we don't even know what's happening until like the first piece of lumber is going up for construction, and we're like, well, what's this going up? So as I had mentioned, the cincycan.org, where we're talking about not only about the Equitable Development Rubric, but also the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, also good cause eviction.
We found out after issue 3 that many of you wanted us to keep our eyes on and keep presenting information to you about what's going on at City Hall. After the 1940s and 50s, there were a lot of houses that were built back in the 1800s, like these ones we have in Over-the-Rhine today, that at that point had about 100 years on them. They were getting old, and you had many people living in one room. and that room still didn't have electricity, it didn't have a heating system, or if it did, you had a space heater, didn't have a bathroom, you would have to share a bathroom for everybody, all the families that are living in the building. So they created these density rules that said, hey, we don't want people living up on top of each other. They were saying that after Elm and Liberty was going on, they were saying, well, if the developers got more density, then they could have created affordable housing. But they had no desire to create affordable housing, and they got all the density that they wanted because you can have these density variances. So what they're trying to do is remove this density variance, which would also remove the community council's ability to say, hey, we oppose this project because we don't think this density variance is appropriate for this space. We've been talking about this trickle-down housing ideology. You can click on, city council meetings, the law and committee, development. I mean, you can really get into this.
Find that motivation, right? Maybe it's you're advocating for your mom. Maybe you're advocating for your children. Maybe you're advocating for your neighbor. You could be advocating for yourself. But just remember, right? You're speaking on behalf of the people, and City Council needs to hear it.
We need to have dedicated funding for affordable housing. We need housing protections. We need a policy that is equity focused. So it includes livable wages, as it looks at race as it is impacting the housing market, how it's impacting every single part of life here in Cincinnati. And that we need to have more of a community-controlled board instead of a mayor-controlled board. And again, those affordability levels are important as well. Relief options here, if you go to 513relief.org or to Cincy CAA, they have relief for housing and utility, food assistance, employment, other services, vaccine and testing, and small businesses. Joined our listservs, go to cincyhomeless.org and join our listservs there. You can also check out This Week at the Coalition on our Facebook. Make sure you're getting that. Engage in ahacincy.org and join their listserv. You could donate $42. I won't tell you why that number is significant, but we need donations because we don't get public money. We survive on the donations that people like you give to the organizations who believe in the work that we do to help create and sustain affordable housing with our member organizations, to provide supportive services, coordinate services, to publish street vibes, to do our education program, to do our tenant organizing and helping those tenant organizations grow through these years. So we really do appreciate your support, and thank you for listening to us today on the Mona and Mark Show. Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Welcome
to the
Mona
and Mark Show.
Hey, everybody. We're glad that you're joining us today. We are happy to be with you on this beautiful day here in May. I am Dr. Mark. I'm the Director of Education at the Homeless Coalition here in Cincinnati. And I am joined by my esteemed colleague, Mona Jenkins, who is the Director of Development and Operations. If you want to say hello.
Hey, everyone. Happy cicada season. Are you happy about them? I'm excited.
So I'm a little bit excited about it. I definitely went looking for them the other day, which I thought was kind of funny. But hopefully when they get here, we'll be ready for that. So we want to go ahead and get the show started with us today. And we're going to talk a lot about affordable housing, what's going on here in Cincinnati. And we're also going to be talking about we're going to answer your questions about affordable housing. So if you have any questions or about homelessness or anything that's going on, please use the chat and we will be monitoring the chat for your questions. We're also going to give you some resources and talk about the next steps. But we want to start off with what we're calling the project, and I'm going to turn on my pointer here so we can see really good. We're going to start with that, but I did want to correct something. Last week I made a mistake, and I said that of the 52 neighborhoods, 53 of them have active community councils. And I thought that was kind of funny because, you know, sometimes when we're doing these, we start talking and we say some things that aren't exactly correct. I mean, it happens from time to time. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of content that we go through in the Mona and Mark show. So please share this video right now so that your friends and family can see me say things that are obviously a little bit funny from time to time. So there are 4 community councils in Cincinnati that are not active right now. But other than that, the other 48 are. So I thought I should mention that, right? Let people know that, you know, sometimes we do make mistakes, you know.
Right, and we accept our mistakes. And so, yes, thanks for that correction, Dr. Mark.
No problem. So we are going to remind you of the challenge that we gave you last week, which was to join your community council. So whatever neighborhood you're living in, you likely have a community council, especially here in Cincinnati. Now, there are 4 that are not active at this time. And we could talk a little bit about why those aren't active. There were some folks that were holding them down for many years who obviously are not there anymore. But we want you to go to tinyurl.com/nattyhood, singular, N-A-T-I hood, because that will bring up the list of community councils. And this is an updated list by Invested Neighborhoods. And they are a neighborhood support organization here in Cincinnati. And you can go to this and it has the neighborhood name as well as the location, when they meet. It has other information, including their emails as well as the websites. So this information is really useful for you as you try to figure out which community council you live in, where you can sign up for that. So go ahead and check that out so that you can make sure that you get you know, the most up-to-date information about what's going on at your community council. So go ahead and check that out. Again, it's tinyurl.com/nattyhood. We do want you to tell us what neighborhood you are in the chat. So go ahead in the chat and check that out. So we're going to ask to do our neighborhood roll call.
Shout it out. Shout it out.
So we are looking in the chat and we see some folks joining us today. Thank you. Please go ahead and share this video. Once again, this is the Mona and Mark show, and we are going to go through a couple things here, which we're excited about today. And the first thing is the affordable housing timeline. And this is something that we are developing with our partner organizations. We are going through the history books and finding out what was going on, but we wanted to present this as a timeline from 2015 when there was no affordable housing trust fund here in Cincinnati till today, when we have a affordable housing trust fund, but we're still struggling to make sure that the pieces of the trust fund are the right pieces that we need. So we wanted to go through this just kind of quickly together. I will post this in our comments. We have some links in there, so you want to make sure you check those out. But when we started this, and Mona's been and I've been a part of this for some time, we have been going to rallies, we've been going to City Hall, we have had tenants that have been speaking out saying that we need affordable housing. We posted a list of, I think, 1,200 names or something like that of people who have died young from the experience of homelessness, that have been taken too soon. And we have built upon that many, many movements that is part of a historical movement that is called the Over-the-Rhine People's Movement. And it doesn't just encompass what's happening in the neighborhood of Over-the-Rhine, because it is spread to all the neighborhoods, because it's about equity and about people saying we deserve to stay here, to live in our homes, and not be told by someone else that we have to leave our homes, right? And so the Housing Now movement grew after decades of advocacy here locally, but also at the state level and the national level. And those marches and those rallies have formed a new thought process on affordable housing and on how we can eradicate homelessness. So you're on mute.
That's right. And it continues today and will continue as we move forward and try to, continue to fight for housing protections and rights and ensuring that everyone has safe and affordable housing in our city.
Absolutely. And so for us, we also think it's important that we acknowledge the people that came before, the organizations that came before, that built this foundation. And we'll be talking about some of those here in a couple minutes. But we did want to point out that our sister organization, Affordable Housing Advocates, is one of the biggest supporters of affordable housing here in Cincinnati. And they do monthly meetings, and everyone's invited to go to the monthly meeting to learn more. And there's folks from HUD and CMHA and developers and bankers and social service agencies, that are all part of Affordable Housing Advocates. So we encourage you, they're the ones that came together back in 2016 at their annual planning meeting and said, look, we're going to focus on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And we launched the Affordable Housing Trust Fund campaign, which meant that, we're going to community events. We went to community councils in 2017, where we tabled at different community events as well, just getting people to understand that an Affordable Housing Trust Fund is something that is in many cities and states and all across this country. And it's a very typical tool that is used to fund and support affordable housing. But of course, because there's been a negative stigma around affordable housing for such a long time, there's kind of a learning curve, right? And that's why we do our education program. You can hear from our speakers, you can do our training, you can also do a tour. We're doing walking tours, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But because education is key, we want to offer that experience to everybody. So we also do that virtually as well. So you can contact us to do our virtual education events if you're not here in Cincinnati. We want to welcome everybody who's joining us on YouTube. We are streaming for the first time live on YouTube today, which is a great milestone. And we want you to just go ahead and share this video, whether it's on YouTube or it's on Facebook right now, so that we can get more folks informed about what's happening and how this has built over the years. So in 2016, when AHA said, look, we want to focus on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, they also did research by talking to people in other cities and other communities like Baltimore, Maryland, where they have a robust affordable housing trust fund, and then using that research to inform how the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was structured, right? So the governance of it, the funding sources, but also the funding sources, the governance, and then the housing protections that go along with that. So the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is not just about the money that goes into it, but it's also about the policy around it that helps protect people and stay in their homes. So in 2017, there was a study that was released that was the LISC study, the Local Initiative Support Corporation. And what they did was they found out in Hamilton County and just in our county, which includes the city of Cincinnati, that we are 40,000 units short of affordable housing. And from that, we were able to push and say, look, we don't want just a city response to affordable housing. We need a county response as well. And we'll talk about some ways in which the county has been stepping up on affordable housing here in a few moments, but understanding that this is a regional problem. The lack of affordable housing is actually a problem all across the country. So no matter where you are watching this, there is not enough affordable housing in the county that you live in for the people who need it, which means that people are simply paying more than 30% of their income towards their housing. So we are bringing that message around to anyone and everybody in 2017, going to the community councils, talking to everybody, getting in the newspapers. And that was starting to push the conversation where in 2018, the city was then able to create the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And it was a very monumental thing that happened because before that, there was no dedicated fund for affordable housing. And the problem with it is that there was not a dedicated funding source to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. and there wasn't a board that would be able to spend the money. So since 2018, the money has just sit in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and it hasn't been spent. And we're in 2021 right now. So whenever you're watching this video, you know that's 3 years where this money has slowly accumulated. Unfortunately, it hasn't reached the need that we have for affordable housing. So one thing that is important to keep in mind is that the need for affordable housing is around 0 to 60% AMI. So organizations like Affordable Housing Advocates are supporting and identifying the need as 0 to 60% AMI. So during the time after the fund was created, we were still working with tenant organizations to make sure that their rights were not being violated. Well, unfortunately, because the courts are set up often to make sure that people with money and power are able to be successful, those didn't result necessarily in people being able to stay in their homes, but pay to stay was first introduced in City Hall after the tenants on Burnett Avenue were fighting to be able to stay in their home. And so what pay to stay means is that people would have the ability to use the fact that they can pay their back rent and they can get current on their rent as a defense, as a legal defense in their eviction hearing for being evicted for not paying rent. And so pay to stay is an important part of housing protections. If people have the money to pay rent, they should be able to stay in their apartments. So we first heard about pay to stay because of the tenant organizing at Burnett Avenue. So moving into 2020, things started to heat up really, really quickly. We saw that we launched the Affordable Housing Trust Fund campaign, which was called Cincinnati Action for Housing Now, which you can go check out their website today. We're still pushing forward with this. And what was unique about it is not just about the $50 million to fund it, but it was also included housing protections and it included a livable wage portion to it as well. So that's why it was so groundbreaking. It was including just cause eviction protections on the housing. It was including the livable wage part of it as well. And it was also monumental because it really ensured that the units would stay affordable forever, right? So that they wouldn't just be built or rehabbed and 10 years later flipped into market rate housing, that they would remain affordable forever, which was a big deal. Now, we know that that campaign took us a long time to get the 9,500 signatures because, 2020, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic. It's hard to get people out there to vote for it or actually to sign something in person, right? And there was also in June of last year, Housing Our Future, which is a report, again, a follow-up of that LISC study. And that talks about different strategies to address the affordable housing crisis in the region. And so there is a link in the description for the Housing Our Future document. So if you do want to check that out and you want to read what some of the plans are. And again, we've talked about Housing Our Future on the Mona and Mark show, and we've talked about how we agree with some things, but some things we don't agree with, or at least I don't agree with, the privatization of public housing being the biggest part of that, which is called RAD, the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, which we could do an hour-long show on that, but we're not going to do that today. Also last year, we saw that the ruminations of the Elm and Liberty fight were starting, and basically that pulled over into 2021, which is why in January, affordable housing was on the minds of our city council, because we were at city council asking them to show up and to make sure that there's affordable housing in our in any development that's getting an abatement, any development that's getting public land, that's getting height variances and density variances, all this public good, that they would be able to include affordable housing. Now, unfortunately, the developer didn't want to include affordable housing, but we did get $750,000 commitment to go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And we also saw the administration get questioned if we could do inclusionary zoning, but they denied that and they said, we're not going to do any inclusionary zoning. And then we submitted our ballot, submitted our petitions to get on the ballot for action for Housing Now. And once that happened, City Council had already requested a report from the city manager on affordable housing. And so because of Elm and Liberty, so because of that, they were ready as soon as we put that in. And they really quickly decided that they didn't want to fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund at $50 million a year. And the city manager wrote a memo to all 6,000 plus city employees saying, if you support issue 3, you're going to lose your job. And Vice Mayor David Mann, I think he's vice mayor. Is he vice mayor? Or is Smitherman vice mayor?
Smitherman is, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
David Mann, point and blank.
Right. David Mann came out, wrote a letter to all potential mayoral candidates saying, don't support issue 3. And so that was kind of this groundswell, and that came out of the report from the city manager saying, who was requested by a city council member, what would it look like if we took $50 million out of the budget? It wasn't, what would it look like if the Affordable Housing Trust Fund passes, the funding for it? It was, what would it look like if we cut $50 million? And they took that, the idea of they're going to cut $50 million and turn that into the No on Issue 3 campaign. Now, things have continued since then, right? We're not finished. Even though issue 3 did not pass, it did force the conversation forward. And the city has made some commitments, which we'll talk about in a second. But we are going to expand this timeline because there's a lot of stuff on here that we haven't talked about and is not on this timeline. And we're going to make it more accessible and easier to read. So we're going to, just wanted to give you a sneak peek at this for this week. But we'll be coming back to the timeline as we go forward. So you can get more information about that at Cincy Housing or actionforhousingnow.com, as well as ahacincy.org and cincycan.org, which you can see at the bottom of the screen. So Mona, what are you thinking about how the trust fund is moving along today? Do you think that it's moving fast enough? What's going on? What do you think? And you're on mute, so.
Yeah, so while there is an immediate urgency for it to get funded, I think what we learned is that it's important that we're all on the same page, right? So sometimes, it's kind of like a relationship when you start dating somebody and you kind of move a little slow in the beginning to kind of get to know one another. And then when things blossom, it's a happy, we hope it's a happy, relationship, right? Which sometimes you may have some disagreements, but in knowing each other, you work through that, right? And so I think that is what's really happening right now in the process, right? So we went through the initial arguments and we found an agreement that yes, affordable housing is important and it is necessary. Great. So let's find ways that we can work together to hopefully move forward at the rate that we need to, working together and able to communicate. That is the key part of any relationship, is having open and honest communication so that we can make progress. So I think that's where we're at right now. We're having some conversations with folks who were in disagreement with us, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, right. That's true. I mean, we're moving this forward. We talked about it last week, so make sure you check out last week's video on Facebook of the Mona and Mark show, because there's so much going on. You could go back to every single Mona and Mark show and you're always going to learn more. So go ahead and share this video right now. I keep saying that. Share the video, just hit the share button so your friends and family can watch this. So if you have any questions, this is a good time to write those in the comments. We did get a neighborhood shout out from Judy. We appreciate that. Western Hills. We also appreciate the share. Thank you for joining us and always, as always, being active on our conversation here today. So thank you so much for that. So we do have some questions loaded up, and one of them is about what are some successful examples of affordable housing. And this is an important question because, you know, there are a lot of folks who are wondering, you know, what does this look like? We hear city council members saying, though, that we're working with trusted people. And so we know that there are some great organizations here in Cincinnati that are doing affordable housing. And one of them, and one of the strongest models that I know of, is Over-the-Rhine Community Housing. And Over-the-Rhine Community Housing grew out of the People's Movement, and it has been around in multiple iterations of Restock and Over-the-Rhine Housing Network merging in 2006, and that enabled them to stay here in Over-the-Rhine, because a lot of folks have been pushed out of Over-the-Rhine. You know, we've lost over 2,400 units of housing in this one neighborhood, and that is because of this mega development, aka turning the neighborhood from a residential neighborhood into a tourist destination. And we could talk about that for a long time. But Over-the-Rhine Community Housing is a great organization that's supportive, and it's community oriented, meaning that they are working with tenants to make sure that they are gainfully employed or working on their resume, that they have child care, that they have programming for older adults at the senior center. And so what they really do is focus on the whole spectrum of life. So from family housing and youth programming to adult working programming to the women's, you know, and senior programs, right? So they're really focused on every aspect of life, because everybody at every stage of life needs safe and affordable housing. And Over-the-Rhine Community Housing also provides support through the Jimmy Heath House and the Recovery Hotel, right? So there are other things that they do that strengthens their ability to make sure that everyone in the community can have safe and stable, affordable housing. And they also have a mixed use property. So some of their properties have storefronts, so they're able to generate income, but they also keep those prices low for people so that those companies can really incubate here in the neighborhood. And they also have historic and new builds. So for instance, they're working on the Perseverance on Vine Street. They've also done the new builds, the flats in the West End. They're also working on buildings now even in Lower Price Hill. So, you know, their model is important for so many different communities, because every community is lacking in affordable housing. And so they also incorporate green space into what they do. So they have a couple playgrounds for the kids, right? And places that they can go so that they can be outside, you know, even though we're in the middle of the city, that they can have access to green space, which is so important. And they've also make sure that the residents don't pay more than 30% of their income towards their housing. So if their income goes up, maybe their rent goes up a little, but they'll never spend more than 30% of their income towards their housing. And they're able to do that by getting grants and donations. They're working with different partner organizations like Tender Mercies. They are get money from renting and leasing. They use tax credits, and we've talked about tax credits and low-income housing tax credits on here before. And they also generate parking income, which is maybe something that people don't know, because if you park where these two murals are in Over-the-Rhine on Vine Street, so on 13th and Vine and 12th and Vine, where these murals are, and you pay for parking there, it actually goes to support affordable housing. So how cool is that? Like, you can actually go out to eat, park somewhere, and pay to park, which would be the same as if you park in a garage or on the street, and that money goes to support affordable housing. So keep that in mind when you go visit Over-the-Rhine, that you can actually do something good by parking. It's kind of wild.
That is. Yeah, and you know, I just want to reemphasize, it's Over-the-Rhine Community Housing is one of our key partners, in that holistic approach that they take is really showing that they care about their residents, because it's not only taking care of them for the moment, but for the movement, right? Going forward, providing that support system that basically leads to self-determination and success down the road, right? Which then enables us to contribute to other folks who are in the same position, right? So it's really building community. And unity is in community, right? So if we are collectively working with one another, and that includes the partnerships, then we can really do it, y'all. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, and that's why I love being a part of the Homeless Coalition, is because of our relationships with our partner agencies and our relationship just with the city overall.
Absolutely. And if you haven't seen, everyone out there, if you haven't seen Rooted Art OTRCH on YouTube, it's linked in the description. Take 20, 25 minutes to watch that video. It's an amazing video that shows different struggles throughout the years. It shows how they were able to preserve buildings, how they were able to make sure they were stabilized, how they were able to make sure that people have affordable places to live, safe and affordable places. So it's in the description below. Check out Rooted OTRCH. And that was from their beloved community event a couple of years ago. So again, that link is in the description, and watch that after we get off of here. You don't need to go check it out now. But there's a question, and we'll kind of work through this one. So the question is just how much money is in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund? So we want you to know that we don't know.
And we laugh because it's so hard to get a straight answer, right? And just even trying to navigate through the city's website, getting the question and answer when people don't really know. And if we're struggling through this and we're not experts. By far, I'm not an expert. I will admit I am learning every day, and especially because things are changing every day. And that's why we do this program, right? Because we want to keep you all updated, because we know your time is valuable.
I mean, I guess some of the estimates were around $1 million at the beginning of this year. We know this is a $1 billion problem, right? So about $1 million, and that includes maybe some Airbnb funding, maybe some VTICA funding. And again, when we go over the timeline, we'll talk about some of what that looks like, a couple one-time donations to it. But ultimately, we know that it's not enough, right? There's not enough money in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, because it takes about $100,000 to make and sustain a unit of affordable housing. So, you know, knowing that and making sure we're still leveraging federal dollars, we'll leverage county dollars, we'll leverage any kind of dollars that we can to make sure that it's sustainable. But we know that it's just not enough, right? So we want to kind of keep that in mind as well. And we did get a comment, and we really appreciate the comments here, saying, you know, I'm super new to the affordable housing conversation in the city, so this is all news to me. Super thankful for you all, and we're thankful for y'all too. I mean, we know that when we get viewers and people say, hey, I saw your show, we really do appreciate that, and we see the shares, right? So if someone shares this right now, we do appreciate that as well, because this conversation is going to keep going, right? And it's going to keep moving forward, and the only way we can move that forward is by being open and transparent and make sure people know what's going on. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Joseph.
And participating as well. So I don't know if we have any other questions in the comments. I'm not seeing any right now. So we're probably just going to kind of move on a little bit, but knowing that you need to reach out to your friends and families to get them involved in their community councils. We know that we talked about the Equitable Development Rubric last week, so hopefully you've had a chance to talk about that or look at that in your community council. But we want to talk about what's going on in City Hall, because City Hall is a place where a lot of stuff happens, and a lot of stuff happens quickly because they often work in emergency mode where they can get things through without the required readings for them. So recently, aka yesterday, City Council passed the rest of the American Rescue Plan funding, and there is about 9 point something million going to affordable housing, and there is 6.4 million going into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is the largest single contribution that we've had into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which I think is pretty significant, right? This may not have happened if we hadn't been pushing this conversation for the last 5 months, 5 years, almost 50 years now, right? If we hadn't been pushing that conversations forward. Bethany House also received $3 million towards their new shelter and living facility that they're building. And there's also the Harbor program, which helps people fix up their houses when they have problems, they have code violations, and they're able to draw that money to be able to match the money. I believe that they are to make the necessary repairs. But overall, the American Rescue Plan money went to shore up any deficits that the city might face. And it was mostly business focused. So there were 2 competing plans to get it voted on yesterday for the remaining $29 million. And one plan was more community focused and the other plan seemed to be more business focused. Unfortunately, the business focused plan was the one that was voted through. And again, when we talk about neoliberalism and the continued privatization of public space and public dollars and public investment, this is something that we need to be concerned about. And also that there were some organizations that and items that didn't get funded, like Carical or the Child Care Initiative that they're working on, some community council support. And so we want to make sure that we know that we're checking that out as well. So the question in the group or in the chat about this is, do you know how soon this funding will be available? So the funds have already been put in the city's account from the ARP, from what I understand. So the funds are already there. In terms of how quickly they'll get into the trust fund and to Bethany House, it's the city, right? So it really depends on how many hoops that they're going to be jumping through over the next couple weeks. But that kind of brings us to this part, that the city budget draft is going to be released, I believe, on Tuesday. So the city manager yesterday said that the city budget draft will be released and that the mayor will accept the draft as presented by the city manager, and then it'll be available almost immediately. So we are thinking about how that is going to shake out, because some of the folks who didn't get funding through the ARP will likely be funded through the city normal budget process. So we're going to have to keep our eye on that and be able to look through that when it comes out on Tuesday. So there's a couple other things that the anti-displacement fund is still in committee. The neighborhood boundary dispute between Clifton and Coreyville around Burnett Woods for Bishop Street, that was not voted on yesterday. So those weren't changed by city council. So a lot of people at the community council level, I think we're pretty excited about that. But ultimately, we are waiting on the affordable housing report, as well as the limiting, the ability for city council to limit. Do you remember that, Mona, where Gooden said, can we stop affordable housing from coming in places, right? So I believe we're still waiting on a report about that. We are also waiting on the housing study that the manager, I think, is going to do an RFP for, to get someone to do a housing study of Cincinnati, which we know we're going to find out that it's bad, right? It's not going to come up with good information in terms of there are going to be a lot of people struggling for housing. We also are waiting on the Housing Advisory Board appointments by the mayor. And we are looking at the HUD funding. Is that applied for? Are they coming through with that? And then also these private donations to the trust fund that the city promised that they would be seeking $30 million in private donations to the trust fund in the next year. So we need to keep our eyes on this stuff, because it will just go by, and will it ever happen? If it's up to the city, likely they won't do that. So if you click on, go into the description, you'll see the city council calendar link. And if you click on that, what that does is it brings up, and we went through this last week, but it is important to kind of look at this again, because if you want to be up to date in what's going on at city council here in Cincinnati, you go here to the city council calendar, it pulls it up, and you can see the date here. This comes all the way to June something. So you scroll back and you can see here's the 18th, that was yesterday, and you click on the meeting details and it'll pull up what's happening at City Hall. And so that could be at the Budget and Finance Committee, that could be at the Neighborhoods Committee, but what it'll do is it'll pull up a list of what's actually happening at City Hall. So we encourage you to always make sure that you're checking out what's going on at City Hall so that you know what to keep an eye on, right? Because a lot of stuff just pops up and then you don't know what's happening with that. So make sure you check that out. We just want to run through this one more time because it's so important for us to realize what opportunity slipped through our fingers back earlier this month. So if we had voted yes on issue 3, there would have been dedicated funds for affordable housing. We would have had just cause eviction protections, a livable wage guarantee. It would have been equity focused, specifically around anti-Black racism that people face in the city and making sure that we're fighting back against that racism. It would also be a community controlled board, and things would be able to remain affordable forever. And the reason we need to keep our eyes on this is as the Housing Advisory Board is picked by the mayor, they will use that housing study to come up with the affordable housing priorities. And if we remember when we talked about the City Hall plan before, they are not restricted. The funding that is put in there is not restricted to 0 to 60% AMI. So the next chance that we have to get the funding and the actions to match the need in the city is through the priorities that are going to be made by this Housing Advisory Board based upon that housing study. So we need to keep our eyes on that as we move forward.
And also because of that funding being so unrestricted, and with a lot of these corporate interests happening, we don't want that funding to go towards things that is not for affordable housing, right? There's certain things that are a priority, and affordable housing should be a priority with this funding, right? So we gotta stay on top of the fact that what we've seen lately is that our city has had more of a corporate interest versus a people interest, and more for, we need to keep that focus on people over profits, right? We will succeed as a city when we put the necessary resources into the people, because when people succeed, then they are able to contribute to the well-being of the city overall. So we got to stay on it, folks. That's that's so key. It not only from a humanist, a humanizing standpoint, but just just a love. If we say we love one another, then we should be showing it. And if folks are in elected office and were elected by the people, the respectable thing to do is to show that your appreciation by working for the people. We pay for that. Our tax dollars pay for it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want to encourage you all to join us by joining This Week at the Coalition. So it's an email listserv. It comes out every week, and it quickly goes through what our member organizations are up to every week. So if you go to just tinyurl.com/HOCO news, and again, the links are in the description of this video, it'll pull up this whole archive of it, and you can just click on them, and what they'll do is it'll pull up like this most recent one. If you click on the one on the top, it's going to pull up the most recent This Week at the Coalition. And so you can go through and it shows you, what is Our Daily Bread sharing this week? What is the Women's City Club of Cincinnati sharing? What is Affordable Housing Advocates sharing? What is, Over-the-Rhine Community Housing sharing, right? What's going on with the Community Issues Forum and Applied Information Resources, And so you can actually go through here and, see what's going on with our member organizations, what they're up to, what's in the news, right? So what's happening, what's going on. This came out yesterday, so it's before the community council meeting. And then if you scroll down even further, you can also go to the help needed section. So people who are looking for volunteers, people who are looking for workers, who are posting jobs, people who are looking for donations, right? So it could be household donations to Bethany House. It could be food donations or something to the shelter house, right? So these organizations are all in here, and you can come down and you can see here's the job posting. So Legal Aid has some jobs available. There are also some announcements from Bethany House or the Caracol 5K that's being done virtually this year, right? So we encourage you to go to tinyurl.com/HOCO News, Homeless Coalition News, and you can go ahead and subscribe to this so that you can get it in your email every week, and you can just go through and see what everyone's up to each week.
And I noticed your calendar, Dr. Mark, of the upcoming education sessions.
Yeah,
you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the calendar is not completely solidified yet, but we are working on a June program. So we wanted to announce today that we are working on a June program that will enable us to provide both in-person and virtual activities. So we are doing in-person tours again. So we'll be doing the tours here in Over-the-Rhine. Again, you can check it out on This Week at the Coalition, because that's going to be the place where you're going to get the most information. And so we are going to talk about that in a second here as well. And I'm really excited because we have great tours. So we have the Over-the-Rhine People's Movement walking tour, which talks about hostile design and talks about the history of the People's Movement, the history of Cincinnati, and how it came about and why it is like it is, right? And then we also do the Over-the-Rhine People's Movement Today tour, which talks about what's going on today. We talk about the SID, we talk about TIFs, we talk about abatement, we talk about different actions, we talk about Willkommen, we talk about Parkway Towers, we talk about the Keep Our Courts, we talk about Grant Park, we talk about, we actually walk through the neighborhood to these different places, which is really awesome. So you can always request a tour. If you have a group of people, a group of friends, some family members, and you want to do something special for someone's birthday, right? So you want to have a group of your friends get together and learn more about Cincinnati and walk around and look at the buildings and learn about the German heritage, but also learn about the Over-the-Rhine People's Movement, which is Appalachian folks and Black folks and people who are immigrants, right, that have made Over-the-Rhine the neighborhood that it is today. Please come out to these tours. So if you go to our website, which is cincyhomeless.org, and you go to our education webpage, you can actually just post on there. There's a Google form. Just fill out that Google form and say, hey, Dr. We'll just put on there, I'm interested in this tour, and we have a group of 10 people or whatever, and we want to come on these days, and we can go ahead and accommodate that for you. So we do the tours on weekends, we can do them on evenings, we can do them on the weekdays. They're really exciting and fun to do. So I would say they're age appropriate, 13 and over, but we encourage everybody to be a part of that. So that's really exciting. And thank you for shouting that out, Mona. I do appreciate that. So we do want you to go ahead and go to 513relief.org if you do need help with either paying your rent or your back rent or your utilities or your waterworks, right? So make sure that you are finding out the relief here for our region right now at 513relief.org or at the Cincinnati Community Action Agency. And that is a great organization, also a member organization that provides a lot of support here in the community.
So as we wrap it up, we'll talk about some takeaways.
So we want you to go ahead and make sure you connect with our listservs, the Homeless Coalition, This Week at the Coalition, as well as AHA's listserv at ahacincy.org. Make sure that you are joining your community council, right? So that was one thing that we've been talking about for a long time, is that we want to make sure that you're joining your community council because that is so important for that ground level information about what's going on with development in your community. We want you to engage in our education programs. We're going to have our trainings, we're going to have our speakers, we're going to have our tours up in June. So some of those will be pay as you can or pay what you can because we want them to be accessed by as many people as possible. So go to cincyhomeless.org /about/education to learn more about that. And then as always, make sure you're following Street Vibes on Facebook, following Street Vibes on the street. Make sure you're carrying around a couple dollars with you when you're going downtown. As people are starting to emerge from their houses, make sure that you're bringing some extra cash with you so that you can purchase or donate for a copy of Street Vibes from one of our distributors. And if you are interested in writing for it, if you are interested in any social justice topic, whether it be photography, whether it be poetry, writing articles, please submit your work to Street Vibes so it can be published, which is a great thing. It provides, if you don't know, Street Vibes provides an alternative to panhandling, so folks are able to sell the paper or get a donation for the paper, and then they actually are able to keep a portion of that money, so they're able to buy food and do other things with that. So please, please, please support Street Vibes.
Absolutely. And as always, feel free to email us, let us know what questions you have. Make sure to follow us, stay in touch, share. We're here for the convo and for affordable housing.
Absolutely. So thanks everybody for being with us today. Please, as Mona just said, share this video. As always, we hope you have a great day. Check out OTRCH Rooted on YouTube. Again, the links are in the description. Welcome and hi to our YouTube fans and to our Facebook fans. Thank you for these great comments. We do appreciate it. We appreciate your support. We appreciate your support of Street Vibes. And we really appreciate that you're here for this conversation about affordable housing. And make sure if you want to learn more, you check out our videos on Facebook. We have a teach-in about issue 3 that's still very relevant. So go please and check that out. We will see you all soon. We hope you have a good one. And
next week, we're going to talk about one of our other member agencies, the Bethany House, and talk about some of the great work that they're doing. So, and I think each week we'll start talking about and letting y'all know a little bit more about our member agency, so and how to get connected. So, love y'all.
Thank you. See y'all later. Bye.
Bye.